Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Reapy Ron, and today we're going to be doing another Deep Rock Galactic build guide. This is going to be for the Cryo Cannon, going over the overclocks that it has. And some of its overclocks really change the way that the Cryo Cannon does, as well as there's a few that I honestly don't know what is the best build for. I'm also not claiming that any of these are really the best build for each of the weapons. They are just the builds that I use, but still, some of these kind of stump me, and I switch up the builds pretty often. I'll be talking about those in depth once we get to them. If you would like to see the Cryo Cannon's builds without any of these overclocks, be sure to check out the list up above. There should be one of those things that pops out that tells you to go check out the build guides. That way you can see them if you don't have any of the overclocks, or if you only have access to a few overclocks. That should give you a general idea of how I build them. So let's begin, and the Cryo Cannon has one clean overclock, which is improved thermal efficiency, which gives you more fuel, and it also makes it so that the pressure drop rate is lowered. You can build the Cryo Cannon however you would like with this. Usually the way that I build the Cryo Cannon is either going for all freezing, which could be going with stronger cooling unit for more freezing, larger reserve tanks for more fuel, increased flow volume, although improved pump works too. Both these are really good. Larger reserve tank for even more fuel, and then something like Cold Radiance or Fragile, either of the tier 5s are your choice. I switch between them pretty often on pretty much all of these builds. This allows you to freeze enemies faster, and you have extra ammunition. If you would like a well-rounded build for attacking enemies at every range, you could go with something like the larger pressure chamber or the stronger cooling unit. Go with the overclocked injector turbine. This increases your reach, which is very important with the cryo gun. Go with something like improved pump. You could also go with super cooling mixture if you would like to freeze things, or the increased tank capacity. I honestly don't usually take higher damage because the cryo gun is not a weapon that you need high damage on. You mostly want to use it for freezing. So I go with this, and then once again I switch between either Fragile or Cold Radiance. So now we're going to move on to our balanced overclocks, and the first one is Tuned Cooler. This allows you to freeze things faster. It also gives you improved flow rate so that you can spray out faster, although you don't gain pressure as fast, and it takes a longer time to charge up. So I use this one to build a few different ways. I either build it to do an overall kind of quality build, or I build it specifically for freezing. Quality build, I usually go with larger pressure chamber because we don't need the increased freezing right here, although you could take it if you wanted one of these. In tier 2, I usually go with overclocked injector. In tier 3, I usually go with improved pump. In tier 4, I usually go with larger reserve tanks. And then in tier 5, I go with either Fragile or Cold Radiance. Both are really good. This gives me a very well-rounded build, where the only disadvantage I now have from taking the Tuned Cooler is that it takes me slightly longer to charge up my Cryo Cannon, which that isn't that much of a disadvantage, and I get a pretty big advantage with the larger pressure chamber and with the improved pump, allowing me to freeze things faster, as well as be able to spray longer and still have high pressure so that I can freeze things faster than I normally would. The other way, if I want to build this for cooling, then I pretty much go with the stronger cooling unit. At tier 2, I either go with larger reserve tanks or with the improved ejector turbine. In tier 3, I still usually go with the improved pump, just to make up for the pressure gain loss. In tier 4, I will go with super cooling mixture once again. This just allows me to freeze things faster. And then I usually go with Cold Radiance with this so that I can freeze things even more efficiently. This does allow you to freeze enemies incredibly fast, especially things like grunts, web spitters, any of like the small to medium enemies. You will freeze them incredibly fast. You'll also be able to freeze any of the larger enemies like Praetorians or even the Mactera incredibly quick with this too. And if you freeze a Mactera or any flying unit, it will instantly kill them. Moving on to flow rate expansion. This one is one of the ones that I honestly don't know how to build it very efficiently because it changes the weapon so much. It makes it so that you gain pressure immensely faster so you can spray out quicker, but you also drop the rate incredibly fast too. So you can kind of overheat your gun quicker this way. So in tier 1, I pretty much always take the larger pressure chamber with this one. That way the pressure drop rate is not that bad. So we can build up the freezing really fast, but our gun isn't going to overheat really quick. I've found that this one really helps with this build. In tier 2, honestly, you can pick between any of these. I usually go with more ammo for this particular build. In tier 3, I usually go with the improved pump because it gives me even more of an advantage with it, and the increased flow rate doesn't give me that much more of an advantage. So that's why I usually take improved pump with it. In tier 4, I usually go with more ammo again, just so that I can have a lot of ammo. And then in tier 5, once again, I will go with either Fragile or Cold Radiance. It depends on which one you want. When I've used this, it still feels a little bit strange, but this is the build that I usually go with it. So that's the one I'm going to recommend. But this one, I honestly don't know what is the best build for it or what people usually build for flow rate expansion. It's just an overclock that I don't use all that often. All right, next we have Ice Spear. Ice Spear, I honestly don't really change much about the gun when I take Ice Spear. You can build it the same way you would be able to whether you had an overclock or not. The only thing that changes with this is your repressure delay is a second longer. So it takes 2 seconds rather than 1 second to start repressurizing. But you do get the added advantage of having the Ice Spear. To use the Ice Spear, you just hit your reload button, and this will take a little while to charge up the Ice Spear, and then you fire it. This can be a little bit difficult for moving enemies, but it is really good against large enemies. This takes 50 of your ammo overall, and then does a really high damage spear. It does more damage when it direct hits an enemy, but it will also splash to other enemies in the nearby area. So with this one, once again, I usually just go with the regular build, which may be stronger freezing, more ammo, or more reach, either one. Increased volume or the improved pump, increased ammo, and then either cold radiance or fragile. Both of them work very well. This one I honestly only really take when I'm going on like dreadnought missions, when I want to use the cryo gun for them. Even then I usually stick with the flamethrower because it's a better option against fighting dreadnoughts. This way does give you a way to hurt dreadnoughts by a substantial amount. So it is a fun overclock to use, but one that I only really use for that specific job. Alright, up next we have Ice Storm, and Ice Storm is, I would probably say, one of the worst overclocks in the game. I really don't like using this one because it kind of messes with what your gun does. This one doubles your damage. You get double damage towards frozen enemies as well, but you lose out on freezing ability, you lose out on tank size, and your pressure drop is much higher. So your gun will overheat faster. You can't freeze enemies as quickly, but if they are frozen, you will do pretty much 4 times damage to them. The Cryo Cannon already doesn't do very high damage, so even 4 times damage isn't really all that much. I don't see why you would really want to take Ice Storm over like the Flamethrower if you just want damage. I would say the Flamethrower is a better option for you. But even so, if you're using the Ice Storm, I usually go with the larger pressure chamber just so that my gun does not overheat as quick. I usually go with more fuel. I go with the improved pump so that I can build up the pressure faster. I go with usually freezing here so that my freezing is somewhat okay, even though it's still not way great, and I would much rather have the larger reserve tanks, but I feel like it's not really that great of a trade-off for it. And then I think I usually go with fragile with this one, just so that I can break enemies a little bit quicker when they're frozen, although I have used cold radiance and it works just fine too. So this is the way that I usually use the Ice Storm, but I don't use Ice Storm very much at all. And then our last overclock is Snowball. This one is similar to Ice Spear, where now instead of an Ice Spear, you pretty much have cryo grenades that you can shoot out of your gun. This costs 35 ammo when you do this. I really only take Snowball on Mactera Plagues because it's incredibly strong against them. Just one Snowball can completely destroy the entire plague. So it's very good in those missions. In every other mission, it's just kind of okay. But this one does come at a cost as opposed to the Ice Spear. This does cost you overall 100 ammo. So if you're not planning on using the Snowball for anything in particular, I probably would recommend not taking it with you. But if you have something like Mactera Plague, then it's very good for that. So for this, I usually go with either the cooling chamber or the larger pressure chamber. Both of these work perfectly fine. I go with more ammo so that I can kind of mitigate some of the ammo loss here. I go with improved pump or improved flow volume. Either one is really good, whichever one you prefer. For tier 4, I go with more ammo again. This is just so that I have actual ammo to be using with my weapon, and I can use the snowballs a bit more often. And then I usually go with cold radiance with this, although fragile is also pretty good. These are usually the ways that I build the Cryo Cannon. Some of these overclocks really change the way that you play the gun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you guys are new here and you haven't already, be sure that you get subscribed. That way you get notifications. Special thanks to all the supporters of the channel. If you would like to be a part of this list, you can by going down in the description below. There is a link to my Patreon and a link to the membership program. You can join either of those and it will net you a spot on here as well as early access to some of these videos. If you would like to see more of my Deep Rock Galactic content, click over here on this playlist. This will take you to all of my builds. Thanks again. Hope you guys have a great day. Bye.